Let us begin with the next section. So at the start, we're going to see the different kind of historical changes that has happened in the different three sectors. Then we see the rising importance of the service or the tertiary sector in production, which means in our country, in the beginning, a lot of emphasis was on agricultural sector. But with time, through age and time, it has become that of late in the last 10 years, tertiary sector, the service sector is coming up, and with the impact of COVID in our lives and in the world, the tertiary or service sector has improved on a large scale. Then you have the different kind of challenges that the service sector faces. After that, we are going to see where are most of the people employed, in which of the sectors are most of the people employed. So let's begin with this section. So let us see the kind of historical change that has happened in the sectors. So when India has started to develop, you will be understanding that we have a lot of natural resources in India. We have a lot of coal. We have a lot of land that can, good land with good soil that can produce a lot of crops. So hence our sector, a lot of emphasis was given on the primary sector, that is the agricultural sector. We wanted to exploit this kind of natural resources that we have so that we can start out our economic development. So different kinds of methods of farming came up, right? You had the green revolution coming in, you had different kinds of, you had mixed farming that happened, you had intercropping that happened. So different kinds of farming came in, and when different kinds of farming came in, agriculture kept progressing through time and many people started to get employed in such a sector. After that, using these agricultural products, you have to make something, a better use of these agricultural products, right? So that's when manufacturing sector rose. You want to make use of cotton in a better way by doing better quality clothes. You have to use it in other different ways, right? So that's when factories came up and everything started expanding. So after that, in the middle, secondary sector started growing, and that had a very big employment impact on the employment scenario. So in the last many years, service sector has started to grow with many people are starting to get employed in such sectors, especially in the developed countries. How exactly? Let's take the example of Japan. Like you've known earlier, Japan has invested a lot in the human capital. So people there are getting better education and they're getting better medical care, and they can function well in order to completely use their potential and capability. So there are many people who are in the research sector, who are in the teaching sector, and who are in the education sector itself. So that is producing many services. So those in the research sector are developing new cars, new automotive, self-automotive vehicles, and etc. So that is what the scenario is at present. So let us see the primary, secondary and tertiary sectors in India and the graphs as to how it looks like. So this graph shows you the production of goods and services in the three sectors. So in green you have the tertiary sector, in red you have the secondary sector, and the blue is depicted by the primary sector. So these two bar graphs show you the year from 1973 to 1974, and this graph shows you the GDP that is produced by the primary, secondary and the tertiary sectors. See the kind of huge leap that has happened from 1973 to 2013. So GDP is at the maximum level taken by the tertiary sector. Hence, let us see the kind of importance that has increased in the tertiary sector. So, In the year 2013-2014, the service sector has replaced the agricultural sector as being the largest producing sector in India, ultimately making its contribution to the highest GDP in India. Have you ever wondered why this tertiary sector is important? Let us see. Let us see some reasons. First reason, in our country we have basic services. What kind of basic services? You have hospitals, you have educational institutions, you have police stations, you have courts, you have defense, you have transport and banks. And for the country to move on an everyday scale, you need such things to work, right? You want to connect with someone who is in the nearby town, and suppose you don't have anything like phones, you will write letters, and once you write a letter you have to go to the post office, right? So you are generating a kind of service there. Another example, suppose you're caught, someone has come and stolen your necklace. What do you do next? You go to the police station and file an FIR. So that is what we do. You cannot leave that necklace is very, very valuable, and you cannot leave it just like that. You have to go do something about it. That is when the police stations come. You want to go travel to the nearby town. How? And that town is around 200 kilometers and you have to go there urgently. The fastest way are the transport sectors that you have. You have buses, you have cars, you have trains and etc. And hence, for an everyday need, you need certain services, and these services is very, very essential for us to move in our lives. And hence the government must take the responsibility to provide such services, because not everyone can afford this kind of service. Not everyone can afford to buy a car. So the government takes care of the Indian railways, which can help the poor people to travel from one place to another. Next you have, like I've earlier mentioned, the tertiary sector is growing because the agriculture and the secondary sector is growing, right? So once the agricultural sector grows, you have more yield and you have to transport and store such kind of yield somewhere. So for transportation and storage, you need some kind of service that has to be given out. So as it's a direct correlation. When you have the agricultural sector that's improving, you also have the service sector that's improving. So that's about it. Then you have, as income levels rise, it is very natural for people to start wanting to live a better life. Like they want to travel, they want to shop, they want to visit private hospitals, they want to start studying in private schools. So this is the basic thing that happens usually in big metropolitan cities. So it is a very natural thing that once you start getting higher income out of anything, you want to use that for a better standard of living. You want to live in a lavish way. So that is why the service sectors are increasing. Next you have, over the last 10 years, there is something called ICT, that is Information and Communication Technology, that has rapidly been increasing. You can see this is increased even more with the age of COVID, right? So before a few years, around 20 years or so, there was absolutely no telephones or mobile phones. You can ask your parental generation, you can ask your parents for that. They had absolutely no phones like the way we do right now. But now everyone is able to access a phone or a computer or a laptop or anything of that sort. And every kind of transaction, suppose you want some kind of, you have Google Pay, you go to buy some kind of you want to buy clothes for a new festival, and you go to the shop to buy new clothes and you have no money with you. You open Google Pay and you do the transaction. Right? That is because there is something called communication technology. You have the internet, which is making it possible for you to transact online. So that is how the service sector is growing exactly. So now that we've seen the service sector is growing, what are the basic challenges that are taking place in this sector? So like it employs many kinds of people. So at one end, service sector needs some kind of people with high skills and high education, and not everyone has that. So it employs very few people, such as works like research or scientist works. So that requires a lot of skill, it requires a lot of education, and not everyone is able to get that. So that is one kind of challenge. So that is one end of the whole story. What is the other end of the story? There are many people that are employed in the primary and the secondary services. So can you see the paradoxical situation here? One end, there is a need for highly skilled and educated workers, and there are limited opportunities. But on the other, there are large opportunities, but a majority of people are employed there. When if you invest in human capital, you can move these people to the service sector, but that does not happen. So this is the biggest challenge that is there. So now let us see where are most of the people employed. So this I am going to be explaining to you with the help of a graph, which shows you the percentage share of the three sectors in GDP. The blue in primary, the secondary in red, and the green in tertiary. So now you can directly see on your own how the service sector and other sectors have changed over the last 40 years. So can you see the share of sector in GDP in percentage? So in 1973, it was the service sector and the primary sector were almost the same. But can you see the kind of decrease that has happened in the year 2013 and the consequent increase that has happened in the service sector in the year 2013? Can you see that? Now let's move on to another graph that shows you how many people are employed in such sector. So back in 1977, there were around 71 out of 100 people, there were around 71 people that were employed in the primary sector. But 45 years later, that has become 40 years later, it has become 44. It has decreased. In the secondary sector and the tertiary sector, there is a marginal increase. It is increased quite a good amount, right? But still, like you can see the numbers here, the primary sector continues to be the largest employer. Many people go to the primary sector itself. So now that you have seen many graphs, you would have noticed that there is a large amount of GDP that's taken away by the service sector. But have you seen that kind of a change that has happened with regard to employment? Has that same increase happened in terms of the kind of employment in the service sector? No, right? That kind of employment is increased in the agricultural sector, but the GDP is not changed in the agricultural sector. Why exactly is this happening? Because there are no enough job opportunities that are created in the secondary and tertiary sector. It is very easy for us to get a job in the primary sector, that is agriculture and farming, because India employs the highest amount of people in the agricultural sector, but there are very few opportunities that are available in the other two sectors. Even though industrial output or the production of goods went up by more than 9 times during the period, employment in the industry went up by around only 3 times. So see this kind, and employment is not being generated because there is no kind of opportunities that are available. So as a result of this, more than 50% of the workers of our country are working in the agricultural sector because there is more kind of opportunities that are available there. So this agriculture produces only 1/6 of the GDP, but a large amount of employment. So you can see the kind of disguised employment that is there. How many of our people who are working in the employment, if they are given better education or they're given a better skill, they can move to the other two sectors, but that is not happening. So if you channelize those kind of people into better jobs and better sectors that are there, you can naturally increase the GDP of that country. In contrast to what I've said earlier, the secondary and tertiary sectors, they contribute a high amount to the GDP, but they employ very few people, which means very few people are working extremely hard to produce that kind of GDP. But in the agricultural sector, many people are working normally to produce very, very less contribution to the GDP. So you can understand the paradox here. So does this exactly mean that the workers in agriculture are not producing as much as they could? Do you think they are not to their potential? So what this exactly means is that there are way more people in agriculture than what is necessary. Suppose that one piece of land needs just 3 people, but it is employing 6 people because the other 3 extra people have nowhere else to go. There is no kind of opportunity. The kind of production that's happening out of that piece of land will not change if these 3 people go out also. So the same kind of production is going to be there if there are 3 people also, if there are 6 people also. So there are more people that are there in agriculture. So this is ultimately called as underemployed because those 3 people are not realizing what exactly is their true potential or capability. Also, there are no job opportunities in the market where they can transition.